Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about X. This is Taiwan's, I guess, bigger hit slasher film. It came out earlier this year. I didn't get to see it, and I was like, well, I should catch up. This is an interesting slasher in that I think you could just say it's sort of just any other kind of slasher. Kids go to location, people kill them, Texas chainsaw, blah de blah. But I do think there's actually a little bit more to this, and I wanted to talk about that, which is also kind of why I want to talk about it. In a sense, this does feel like is just doing a basic horror thing. I think a lot of people feel like it loses that. In some sense it does, in some sense it doesn't, in some sense people should chill out about things, but whatever. So X basically is about a bunch of people have gotten in their car from a strip club, work at a strip club, and two strippers and the, I guess, executive manager, producer guy of strip club, I don't know. This guy who I honestly, and this is pretty funny, did not know was Kid Cudi because what is he credited as? Like Scott Muschetti, and I didn't recognize him, even though I know Kid Cudi. I mean, not personally, but like I know his music, and I thought if you told me, do you know what Kid Cudi looks like, I'd say yes, and that's a weird question, but like I thought I knew, and apparently I don't because I did not recognize him until midway through this movie, which is kind of funny. I was like, oh my god, which is weird. Why isn't he credited as Kid Cudi? Like, oh, Cool J still Cool J, Ice Cube still Ice Cube. What is it with this guy? But I don't know, whatever. That's what he wants. I guess I respect it, or have to respect it, or something. I don't know. He's, I guess, the male talent, and then they have a director and his girlfriend who's basically just holding the boom and stuff. And they go to this house where they're going to shoot a porno movie called The Farmer's Daughter. They go rent this kind of cottage that's on the land of these really extremely old couple, and of course, you know, the old couple goes crazy and kills them, particularly the wife, who is also played, one of the strippers is played by Mia Goth, but she also put on a ton of makeup to play the old lady as well. And as she gets she doesn't get excited by her husband anymore, can't get it up because of a heart problem, and so she goes crazy and he goes crazy, and they kill, you know, the strangers, and that's sort of how they get off, is they rent out their room to hippies. And since hippies' parents don't call them, or whatever generation gap thing, they get to murder them and nobody figures it out. So basically that is sort of what happens, and they kind of try to defend themselves, of course. But yeah, while they're shooting this porno movie, a slasher thing happens at the same time. I don't know, it's interesting because I do feel like this is like, oh, this is the most messed up kind of slasher thing. I also think it's like just a good concept. Like I don't necessarily, I do think sometimes it's like really pouring on like oh, isn't it controversial we're doing this, but another part of me is like, well, regardless, it's a good concept. But it isn't like the most extreme porn or anything, but at the same time, like, they want to get an R rating, and also at the same time, like, 70s stuff isn't as crazy as now, so there's a fine line in all of that. But I do think this film is saying more than just like, you know, person have sex, I stab them. And this film does actually have a better, there is a scene where Brittany Snow, who's in this, so I'm very surprised Brittany Snow would be in a horror movie with nudity and stuff, was a little surprising for me. I don't know her career fully, but I was a little surprised. And she's really good, by the way, in this. She really is probably one of the standouts. It's interesting because you'd think Mia Goth would just be the one you'd remember, but I think all the women and Kid Cudi basically as people I seem to remember. But her playing the old lady as well, putting on tons of makeup, she's very, very talented. I'm sure I've probably reviewed her in something before, but in this she's really, really good, especially as the kind of big female horror protagonist, wink wink nudge nudge, and her playing the villain as well. I thought she did a really good job. I didn't really know that. You figured out eventually if you didn't know. But what I think this film ultimately is trying to say as kind of a grand kind of narrative thing is that you have these old people who see these young people who are trying to basically make their own thing. They want to get started in the adult film industry. They're all excited about the possibility of life, of the success of this, possibly because of Debbie Does Dallas. I don't mention Deep Throat, but whatever. Debbie Does Dallas was more recent at the time, so that's why. But and then these old people, to get their kicks off, have to kind of use them to basically get their rocks off, and they don't care what they do to them. I sort of think, in a sense, what this film is saying, and I do think some of the ageism in this film is not particularly great. The old people in this, it looks like they've never understood what sunscreen is, which, like, sure, at the time that is an actual possibility, but it's so extreme, the idea of like old flesh and stuff like that. I was like, all right, guys, let's it's like, I think Ty West is older than me, but I was like, this is a bit much. I did find it to be kind of definitely in the ageist category. I get that you're trying to say something, but I think it is about basically what you could say about the thing you hear about, like what's happening to millennials, what's happening to Gen Z versus, you know, particularly baby boomers who are able to profit and have multiple homes and have all this prosperity, whereas the younger generations are not able to. And that's honestly what I think this is about. That's what I think X is trying to say, is like, you see these people, they are far more progressive, they have a very healthy view of sexuality, they're profiting from it, they're all knowingly, it's not like they were coerced or they were, you know, drugged or anything like that. They're very knowing in what they're doing, they're very self-aware, and they're, you know, doing different things, and even though it's maybe not what they agree with, it's their own way. And these people are like, well, we can't get off unless we murder them, so fuck their dreams, basically. We need to profit. And that's honestly what I think X is about. And maybe I think the ageism, the point of it is to say, look at you, you know, evil old people, goblins, are stealing from the younger generations and not letting them have their chance. And particularly in a post, like, I've seen a lot of these articles over and over again, how millennials aren't owning homes and things like that, but I do think X is predominantly about that. Now, I do think, I think Ty West has gone a little too mean with it. You know, there's certain times in your life where you say a joke and it's mean, you know, but you kind of mean something behind it. And I think X is has a good message and is trying to say something, but ultimately, like, if you do it to me, like, two wrongs don't make a right is kind of the thing I feel about this film. With that, and there's been times in my life where someone's made, I remember specifically there's a family member who kept saying these inappropriate stuff, and I did say a mean joke, and his jokes stopped, and I felt justified for a second, but I still felt kind of bad. And I think, you know, maybe you made your point, but that doesn't mean you are justified in doing so. And, you know, I do still feel bad, but I'm also glad he doesn't talk about that anymore. So I'm still like, well, you know, if I was going to put myself down to that level, so be it, I guess. But I did feel like that. It reminded me of me doing that when I saw this film, is because of that. Ultimately, it's a simple slasher film, but it's very well done. Kind of simple slasher, Texas Chainsaw kind of thing. I'd say, to me, it's like a slasher the way it's set up, but it's also very Texas Chainsaw inspired, I would say. I didn't look it up, but I'm just gonna, like, I think it takes place in Texas even, and like the weird idea of, like, I think the thing Texas Chainsaw really did well is like the idea that, like, when you drive through Texas in these vast, like, you're always driving, there's like these vast spaces, that there's someone weird out there, and I think this plays into that, even if it's not in Texas or not. Is it in Texas? If you're into horror films, I'd say this is a tight, kind of fun horror movie. That's basically what it is. It's well constructed, it's well done, it has a little bit to say. I think it did it effectively. I thought it did it fine. I don't think it, like, changes the world or anything. I don't know Ty West's work outside of, I think I reviewed him in one of the VHSs or something, but and I liked Maya Goth in it. I definitely think she's, you know, amazing to watch in this, but I don't necessarily think of Ty West as like a master from this. I am curious because I want to see the prequel and the eventual sequel, and see what those are like, and I think the possibilities that this franchise has brought seem very interesting, but this in itself just feels like, you know, any other, you know, very well done, certainly, and promising and interesting to a certain degree, but there's nothing, you know, it's just like it. I know people like A24 and everything, but like to me it's like this is just A24 in name only. This could be released by Dimension back in the day. I get people like the label, but it's not necessarily that much smarter. It's just like a little bit smarter and healthier about sexuality, and that's nice, and I like that to a certain degree. But I don't know if you ever need to see this, really sit down with it. You could like have a beer with a friend and talk over parts of it and go like, oh yeah, oh that part's gross, and this thing and all this, you know, that's what this movie's for. But I think Ty West would be okay with that. So I think X kind of shoots its shot, and then, you know, you clean up afterwards and you're kind of just like fine with what happened in the end. So if you have seen X and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.